The morning mist clings to the ancient stone walls of Thornfield Manor like a shroud of forgotten dreams. It's October 1824 in the heart of Yorkshire, where the changing leaves paint the countryside in shades of gold and amber. But inside the grand estate, there's little beauty to be found in the cold exchanges between family members who share a name, but not a heart. "Margaret, where are you, you useless girl?" The sharp voice of Lady Helena Ashford cuts through the morning air like a whip crack. 20-year-old Lady Margaret Ashford hurries down the servants' corridor, her worn brown dress rustling against the stone walls. Her dark blonde hair is pulled back severely, and her green eyes hold a sadness that seems far too old for her years. Margaret's story is one that society whispers about but rarely acknowledges: the unwanted stepdaughter. When her beloved father, Lord Edmund Ashford, died 3 years ago, he left behind a will that secured Thornfield Manor for his blood heir. But until Margaret marries or reaches 25, her stepmother Helena controls her life completely. Helena Ashford is a woman who measures worth in gold and beauty, and in her eyes Margaret possesses neither. Tall and elegant with silver-streaked hair and ice-blue eyes, Helena has spent 3 years systematically destroying Margaret's confidence, ensuring she knows her place in the household hierarchy. "There you are," Helena says with disgust as Margaret appears in the main hall. "Look at yourself. Your dress is wrinkled, your hair is a mess. Is this how a lady presents herself?" Margaret keeps her eyes downcast. "I was helping Mrs. Winters in the kitchen with the bread for the harvest workers, stepmother." "Of course you were." Helena's laugh is sharp and cruel. "Always consorting with the servants. No wonder no gentleman will want you. You're plain, you have no dowry thanks to your father's poor investments, and you lack the feminine graces that attract a proper husband." Standing beside Helena is her daughter, Lady Vivienne Ashford, a vision of ethereal beauty at 18. With golden curls that catch the light like spun sunshine and cornflower blue eyes, Vivienne represents everything Helena believes a woman should be. 3 marriage proposals have already been made for Vivienne's hand, each from increasingly wealthy suitors. "Mother's right, Margaret," Vivienne says with false sweetness. "Perhaps you should focus on learning useful skills instead of harboring foolish romantic notions. A woman in your position needs to be practical." What they don't know, what no one knows, is that Margaret harbors a secret that would shock them all. Late at night, when the house sleeps, Margaret writes poetry, stories, observations about human nature that would rival any published author of their time. She's taught herself French and Italian from books in her father's study, and she's read every volume in their extensive library twice over. But these accomplishments mean nothing in a world that judges women solely on their marriage prospects. The morning's cruelty is interrupted by the thunder of hooves on the cobblestone drive. Through the tall windows, they can see a magnificent black stallion approaching, ridden by a figure that makes Vivienne gasp and Helena straighten her posture immediately. The Duke of Ravencrest has arrived. Duke Sebastian Blackthorne, 29 years old, is a man who needs no introduction in English society. His black hair catches the sunlight as he dismounts with fluid grace, revealing a tall, powerful frame that speaks of both nobility and strength. His reputation precedes him: war hero, successful landowner, and the most sought-after bachelor in England. But he's also known for something else: his impossibly high standards. For 3 London seasons, every eligible lady has thrown herself at his feet. Beautiful duchesses' daughters, wealthy merchants' heiresses, accomplished young women with impeccable breeding, none have managed to capture his interest for more than a brief conversation. Society has begun to whisper that the Duke of Ravencrest is impossible to please. Helena practically glows with anticipation as she rushes to greet their distinguished visitor. This unexpected visit can only mean one thing: the Duke has heard of Vivienne's beauty and has come to court her personally. "Your Grace," Helena curtsies deeply, "what an extraordinary honor. We weren't expecting you." Sebastian's dark eyes scan the entrance hall, taking in every detail with the sharp intelligence that made him successful in both war and business. "Lady Ashford, I was passing through Yorkshire on estate business and heard about your harvest festival tomorrow. I thought it might be interesting." Vivienne steps forward, every movement calculated to showcase her grace. "Your Grace, I'm Lady Vivienne Ashford. Perhaps you've heard of our little celebration. though I'm sure it pales in comparison to London entertainments. Sebastian's gaze lingers on Vivienne for a moment, acknowledging her beauty with the polite detachment of a man accustomed to beautiful women. I'm sure it will be quite educational, Lady Vivienne. Margaret, standing in the shadows near the servants' entrance, watches this exchange with a mixture of fascination and resignation. Of course the Duke would be interested in Vivienne. Every man was. She turns to slip away unnoticed when something unexpected happens. And you are, Sebastian's voice stops her mid-step. Margaret freezes, suddenly aware that the Duke's attention has shifted to her. Helena's face flashes with panic and irritation. That's just Margaret, Your Grace, my late husband's daughter. She was just leaving to attend to her duties. Margaret, Sebastian repeats, and there's something in the way he says her name that makes her look up for the first time. When their eyes meet, his dark and penetrating, hers green and startled, something passes between them that neither can immediately understand. Lady Margaret, Sebastian says formally, offering her a slight bow that shocks everyone present. No Duke bows to an unwanted stepdaughter. Margaret manages a trembling curtsy. Your Grace, she whispers, then hurries away before anyone can say another word. But she doesn't see Sebastian's eyes follow her retreat, or the thoughtful expression that crosses his face. That evening, as Helena and Vivienne plan their strategy for tomorrow's festival, how to dress, how to engage the Duke, how to secure a proposal, Margaret sits alone in her small chamber under the eaves. Through her window, she can see lights in the guest quarters where the Duke resides. She pulls out her worn journal and writes, "Today I met a man who looked at me as if I were a person, not a shadow. For one moment I forgot that I am unwanted, forgot that I am plain, forgot that no gentleman will ever want me. Perhaps that is what hope feels like, dangerous and beautiful and absolutely forbidden." What Margaret doesn't know is that in the guest quarters, Duke Sebastian Blackthorne stands at his own window, thinking about green eyes that held depths he'd never seen in London ballrooms. For the first time in years, his interest is truly captured, but not by the person everyone expects. Tomorrow's harvest festival will change everything, but tonight, two souls separated by circumstance and expectation both stare into the darkness, wondering about the impossible. The harvest festival dawns crisp and golden, with autumn sunlight streaming through the ancient oak trees that surround Thornfield Manor. The estate grounds have been transformed into a celebration of the season's bounty. Tables laden with fresh bread, roasted meats and harvest vegetables stretch across the main lawn. Villagers, tenant farmers and local gentry mingle together in one of the few occasions where social barriers temporarily soften. Helena has orchestrated every detail of Vivienne's appearance like a general preparing for battle. Vivienne floats through the crowd in a dress of celestial blue silk that perfectly matches her eyes, her golden curls arranged in an elaborate style that took her lady's maid 2 hours to perfect. She is, quite literally, a vision of perfection, and every man at the festival, including several eligible young lords who have come hoping to meet the Duke, cannot help but stare. Margaret, meanwhile, has been relegated to what Helena calls appropriate duties, helping serve refreshments, ensuring the elderly guests are comfortable, and managing the practical details that keep such an event running smoothly. She wears her only decent dress, a simple green wool that brings out her eyes but will never compete with Vivienne's silk and jewels. "Remember," Helena whispers to Vivienne as they spot Duke Sebastian near the archery demonstrations, "be charming but not forward, knowledgeable but not overwhelming. Men like him want a beautiful ornament who can also provide intelligent conversation when required." Duke Sebastian, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark coat that emphasizes his broad shoulders, moves through the crowd with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to being the center of attention. His black hair catches the sunlight, and there's something almost predatory in the way he observes everything around him, as if he's searching for something specific. Vivienne approaches him with practiced grace, flanked by her devoted admirers. "Your Grace, you simply must try the honey cakes. They're made from a recipe that's been in our family for generations." Sebastian accepts the offered cake with polite interest. "It's excellent, you have talented cooks." "Oh, I didn't make them myself," Vivienne laughs melodiously. I leave such tasks to those better suited for them, though I do paint watercolours of flowers. Perhaps you'd like to see my portfolio." As Vivienne chatters about her artistic accomplishments, all properly feminine and decorative, Sebastian's attention begins to wander. Something is missing from this picture-perfect scene, and he finds himself scanning the crowd for what exactly? His question is answered when he spots Margaret near the refreshment tables, quietly ensuring that old Mrs. Patterson has a comfortable chair, and that young Tommy Miller's scraped knee receives proper attention. She moves with unconscious grace, her focus entirely on others' comfort rather than her own appearance. "Excuse me, Lady Vivienne," Sebastian says, interrupting a detailed description of her latest flower painting. "I believe I see someone who requires my attention." Vivienne's perfect smile falters as she watches the Duke walk away from her mid-conversation, something that has never happened to her before. Sebastian approaches Margaret just as she's explaining to a confused French merchant about local harvest customs in flawless French. The merchant's face lights up with gratitude at being able to communicate properly, and Margaret's natural warmth transforms her entire appearance. "Mademoiselle," the merchant says, "vous parlez français comme une native, merci infiniment pour votre aide." "Je vous en prie," Margaret replies with a smile that makes Sebastian stop in his tracks. "J'espère que vous profiterez de notre festival." As the merchant moves away, Margaret turns to find the Duke standing behind her, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that makes her cheeks flush. "Your French is remarkable, Lady Margaret," Sebastian says. "Where did you learn to speak with such fluency?" Margaret's guard immediately goes up. I taught myself, Your Grace, from books in my father's library. I hope I haven't overstepped by speaking with the merchant. He seemed confused about the customs." "Overstepped," Sebastian's eyebrows rise. "You showed kindness and intelligence. How could that be overstepping?" For a moment, Margaret is speechless. No one has ever praised her learning before. Helena constantly reminds her that too much education makes a woman unattractive to men. "Tell me," Sebastian continues, "what else have you taught yourself from your father's library?" Despite herself, Margaret finds herself relaxing under his genuine interest. Italian, a little Spanish, history, philosophy, some natural sciences. My father had an extensive collection before he... She stops, unwilling to mention her father's financial troubles that led to their reduced circumstances. "Before he passed," Sebastian finishes gently, "I knew Lord Edmund slightly. He was a man of considerable intellect. It seems his daughter inherited that trait." Their conversation is interrupted by a commotion near the dancing area. Young Lord Pembroke has clearly had too much ale and is making unwelcome advances towards Sarah, one of the village girls. The girl's distress is obvious, but the social difference makes it difficult for anyone to intervene without causing scandal. Without hesitation, Margaret steps forward. "Lord Pembroke," she says firmly, "perhaps you'd like to try the spiced cider. Mrs. Winters has outdone herself this year." "Don't want cider," Pembroke slurs, not releasing Sarah's arm. "Want to dance with this pretty little thing." "I'm afraid Sarah has promised the next dance to someone else," Margaret says, positioning herself between them. "Haven't you, Sarah?" The village girl nods gratefully, but Pembroke's grip tightens. "Mind your own business, Margaret. Nobody asked the old maid to interfere." The words hit their target, and Margaret's face flushes with humiliation. But before she can respond, a new voice cuts through the tension like a blade. "Actually, Sarah has promised the next dance to me." Everyone turns to see Duke Sebastian stepping forward, his presence immediately commanding respect. Pembroke's hand drops from Sarah's arm as if burned. "Your Grace, I didn't realize." "Of course you didn't," Sebastian says coldly. "Perhaps it's time you found your carriage, Lord Pembroke. I believe you've celebrated quite enough for one day." As Pembroke retreats with his tail between his legs, Sebastian turns to Sarah with a gentle smile. "Would you honor me with that dance, Miss Sarah?" The village girl curtsies deeply, overwhelmed by the Duke's kindness. As they take their place among the dancers, Margaret watches with a mixture of admiration and growing confusion. This is not the cold, demanding nobleman society gossips about. Helena appears at Margaret's elbow, her face tight with fury. "What did you do?" she hisses. "I don't understand, stepmother." Don't play innocent. Vivienne has been trying to engage the Duke's attention all afternoon, and somehow he keeps ending up near you. First the merchant, now this spectacle. Are you deliberately trying to embarrass our family? Margaret's heart sinks. "No, stepmother, I was only trying to help." "Help yourself to attention that doesn't belong to you." Helena's voice is vicious. "Remember what I told you, Margaret. No gentleman will want you, especially not a duke. Don't mistake politeness for interest, or you'll only humiliate yourself further." As Helena stalks away to comfort Vivienne, Margaret feels the familiar shame wash over her. Of course her stepmother is right. The Duke was simply being kind, the same way he was kind to Sarah. To think it meant anything more was foolish beyond measure. But she doesn't see Sebastian watching their exchange from across the dancing area, or the way his jaw tightens as he observes Helena's obvious cruelty toward Margaret. As evening falls and the festival begins to wind down, Margaret retreats to a quiet corner of the gardens to help pack away the remaining refreshments. The other servants have gone inside, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the melancholy that always follows moments of unexpected happiness. Hiding from the celebration, Margaret spins to find Sebastian approaching through the garden path, his formal coat replaced by a simple white shirt and dark vest. In the lamplight he looks younger, more approachable but no less magnificent. "Your Grace, I was just finishing the clean-up." "The servants can handle the clean-up," Sebastian says, sitting on a nearby stone bench. "Sit with me, Lady Margaret." It's not really a request when a duke asks, so Margaret perches nervously on the opposite end of the bench, acutely aware of the impropriety, and yet unwilling to leave. "Tell me about your father," Sebastian says quietly. The unexpected question opens floodgates Margaret didn't know existed. She finds herself speaking about Lord Edmund, his love of books, his kindness to their tenants, his failed investments that came from trusting the wrong people, his final illness that left her alone in a household where she was no longer welcome. "He used to say that intelligence was the only inheritance that could never be taken away," Margaret finishes softly, "though I sometimes wonder if he was wrong about that too." "What do you mean?" Margaret hesitates, then decides she has nothing left to lose. "My stepmother believes that learning makes a woman unmarriageable, that men prefer women who are ornamental rather than intellectual. She says I've made myself even more undesirable by reading too much." Sebastian is quiet for a long moment, staring out at the moonlit gardens. When he speaks, his voice carries a weight that surprises Margaret. "Do you know why I've never married, Lady Margaret?" Margaret shakes her head. "Because every woman I've ever met has tried to be what she thought I wanted rather than who she actually was. Intelligence hidden behind false giggles, opinions suppressed in favor of agreement, passions abandoned for propriety." He turns to look at her directly. "Until today, I had begun to think that authentic women no longer existed in our society." Margaret's heart stops. "Your Grace." "You defended a village girl at the risk of embarrassing yourself. You spoke fluent French to help a confused stranger. You spent the entire day ensuring others' comfort while your stepmother paraded your stepsister like a prize mare." His voice grows intense. "You are everything real that I thought this world had lost." Before Margaret can respond, voices approach from the main path. Helena and Vivienne emerge into the garden, clearly searching for someone. "Margaret," Helena's voice is sharp with irritation. "There you are, it's time to go inside." She stops short when she sees Sebastian on the bench, and her expression shifts to calculating interest. "Your Grace, I do hope Margaret hasn't been bothering you with her chatter." "On the contrary," Sebastian says, rising smoothly. "Lady Margaret has been the most engaging company I've enjoyed in quite some time." Helena's smile becomes strained. "How kind of you to say so. Of course, Margaret does tend to monopolize conversations when she should know better." Sebastian's eyes flash with something dangerous. "I believe Lady Margaret knows her worth far better than some people give her credit for." The words hang in the air like a challenge. Helena's face goes pale, and Vivienne looks between them with growing alarm. "Of course, Your Grace," Helena recovers quickly. "We would never dream of disagreeing with your judgment." As they walk back toward the house, Margaret trails behind, her mind reeling from Sebastian's words. Could he really mean what he seemed to be saying? Or was this just another moment of kindness that she was foolishly misinterpreting? That night, as Margaret lies in her small bed staring at the ceiling, she doesn't know that in the guest quarters, Duke Sebastian Blackthorne is writing a letter to his steward, instructing him to investigate the true circumstances of Lord Edmund Ashford's death and the current situation of his daughter. Something about Helena Ashford's treatment of Margaret doesn't sit right with him, and Sebastian has learned to trust his instincts. Tomorrow, he'll begin to uncover truths that will shake the foundation of everything Margaret believes about herself and her place in the world. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Margaret falls asleep with hope blooming in her chest like a flower reaching toward the sun. 3 days have passed since the harvest festival, and Thornfield Manor feels different, charged with an electric tension that everyone can sense but no one dares name. Duke Sebastian has extended his visit indefinitely, claiming interest in the local estate management practices, but his true focus has become increasingly obvious. Every morning, he finds reasons to seek out Margaret's company. Yesterday, he discovered her in the estate's conservatory, carefully tending to the exotic plants her father once prized. Their conversation about botanical cultivation lasted 2 hours, during which Margaret's knowledge of plant biology and natural sciences left Sebastian genuinely impressed. When she mentioned her father's greenhouse journals, written in his own hand with detailed observations, Sebastian asked to see them, not out of politeness but with genuine scholarly interest. Helena watches these interactions with growing panic and fury. Her carefully laid plans for Vivienne are crumbling, as the Duke continues to show marked preference for the stepdaughter everyone was meant to ignore. "This is intolerable," Helena rages to Vivienne in the privacy of her chambers. "That ungrateful girl is ruining everything. The Duke was meant for you, your beauty, your accomplishments, your breeding. Instead, he wastes time listening to Margaret prattle about dead plants and dusty books." Vivienne, for the first time in her pampered life, faces the possibility that her beauty might not be enough to secure what she wants. "Perhaps we need to take more direct action, Mother. Margaret has always been fragile. If she understood how inappropriate her behavior was, surely she would withdraw." Helena's eyes glitter with malicious calculation. Indeed, it's time Margaret remembered her place. That afternoon, Margaret is summoned to Helena's private sitting room, a space she's rarely allowed to enter. The room is decorated in shades of gold and cream, with delicate furnishings that speak of wealth and refined taste. Helena sits behind an ornate writing desk, every inch the lady of the manor. "Sit," Helena commands, not looking up from the papers spread before her. Margaret perches on the edge of a chair, her hands folded in her lap. After several long minutes of deliberately ignoring her, Helena finally speaks. "I've been very patient with your recent behavior, Margaret, but my tolerance has limits. Your inappropriate pursuit of the Duke's attention ends now." "Stepmother, I haven't pursued." "Don't lie to me." Helena's voice cracks like a whip. "Do you think I'm blind? Following him around like a lovesick puppy, monopolizing his conversations, making a spectacle of yourself with your pretentious displays of learning." Margaret's cheeks burn with humiliation. "He asked me about the plants. I was only answering his questions." "Questions you encouraged with your forward behavior." Helena stands, moving around the desk like a predator circling prey. "Let me remind you of a few facts, my dear stepdaughter. You have no dowry. Your father's debts consumed any inheritance you might have expected. You are plain, awkward, and entirely too intellectual for any man's comfort. Most importantly, you are dependent on my charity for every scrap of food you eat and every stitch of clothing you wear." Each word lands like a physical blow, but Helena isn't finished. "The Duke is amusing himself with your pathetic gratitude, nothing more. Men like him don't marry women like you. They might keep them as poor relations or companions to their wives if they're feeling charitable. But marry them? The idea is laughable." Helena returns to her desk and picks up a letter. I've taken the liberty of writing to my sister Catherine in Scotland. She runs a school for young ladies of reduced circumstances. She's agreed to take you on as an assistant teacher, a position suited to your limitations. You'll leave next week. Margaret's world tilts on its axis. Leave, but this is my home, my father. Your father is dead, and this house belongs to me until you marry, which we've established will never happen, or until you reach 25. I think it's best for everyone if you accept your fate gracefully. Does the Duke know about this decision? The words slip out before Margaret can stop them. Helena's smile is cruel and triumphant. The Duke, my dear, will be relieved to have the burden of your unwanted attention removed. In fact, I plan to inform him this evening that you've realized the inappropriateness of your behavior and have chosen to remove yourself from temptation. Margaret sits in stunned silence as Helena's words destroy every fragile hope she'd allowed herself to nurture. Of course her stepmother is right. Of course the Duke was simply being polite. How could she have been so foolish as to believe otherwise? You may go, Helena dismisses her with a wave. And Margaret, if you're thinking of running to the Duke with tales of my cruelty, remember that I hold the deed to this estate. One word from me, and you'll find yourself without even a roof over your head. Margaret flees to her chamber, her heart breaking with each step. She throws herself onto her narrow bed and allows the tears to come, tears for her father, for her lost home, for the impossible dream of being loved by a man like Sebastian. But she doesn't know that her conversation with Helena has been overheard. Sebastian has developed a habit of taking afternoon walks through the manor's corridors, ostensibly to admire the architecture, but actually hoping to encounter Margaret. As he passes Helena's sitting room, the raised voices draw his attention. What he hears through the partially open door fills him with cold rage. Instead of confronting Helena immediately, Sebastian retreats to his quarters and summons the express messenger he sent for yesterday. A thick packet of documents awaits him, the results of his investigation into Lord Edmund Ashford's affairs. What Sebastian discovers makes his blood boil. Lord Edmund Ashford was not financially ruined by bad investments, as Helena has claimed. He was systematically cheated by Helena's brother, a solicitor who convinced Edmund to invest in non-existent ventures while Helena encouraged the friendship. When Edmund discovered the fraud and threatened to expose it, he died suddenly of what was declared natural causes, but the timing was suspiciously convenient. More damning still, Edmund's will clearly states that Margaret should inherit a substantial dowry from funds held in trust, but those funds have been mysteriously transferred to cover estate debts that Sebastian's investigation shows never existed. Helena Ashford hasn't just been cruel to Margaret, she's been stealing from her systematically for 3 years. Sebastian stares at the documents as pieces fall into place. Helena needs Margaret gone before her 21st birthday next month, when she could legally demand an accounting of the estate finances. The woman isn't just cruel, she's a criminal. As evening falls, Sebastian makes his way to Margaret's chamber. He finds her packing her few belongings with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. Going somewhere, Lady Margaret? He asks softly from the doorway. Margaret spins around, hastily wiping her eyes. Your Grace, I didn't hear you approach. You didn't answer my question. Margaret can't meet his eyes. My stepmother has arranged a position for me in Scotland. As a teacher, she feels it would be beneficial for me to have useful employment. Sebastian steps into the room, his presence filling the small space. And what do you feel? The gentle question breaks Margaret's composure. It doesn't matter what I feel. She's right, I've been inappropriate, presumptuous. I've mistaken kindness for something else. It's better that I leave before I embarrass myself further. Margaret, Sebastian's voice is quiet but commanding. Look at me. Reluctantly, Margaret raises her eyes to meet his. What she sees there makes her breath catch. Fury, determination, and something that looks remarkably like love. What if I told you that everything your stepmother has said about your circumstances is a lie? Margaret blinks in confusion. I don't understand. Sebastian pulls out the packet of documents. Your father didn't lose your inheritance through poor investments. It was stolen. Your stepmother and her brother conspired to defraud him, and when he discovered their scheme, he died under highly suspicious circumstances. Margaret sways as if struck. That's impossible. My father died of heart failure, the physician said. The physician was paid by your stepmother's family. Sebastian's voice is gentle but implacable. Margaret, you aren't a burden who depends on Helena's charity. You're the rightful heir to this estate and a considerable fortune. Helena has been stealing from you for 3 years, and she needs you gone before you can legally challenge her control. The papers seem to dance before Margaret's eyes as Sebastian explains the evidence. Bank records showing transferred funds, forged documents, testimonies from servants who witnessed strange behavior the night of her father's death. But why, Margaret whispers, why would she do this to me? Because you represent everything she isn't, Sebastian says, moving closer. Intelligence instead of calculation, genuine kindness instead of social manipulation, natural grace instead of practiced performance. She couldn't destroy your spirit through cruelty alone, so she decided to destroy your life. Margaret sinks onto her bed, overwhelmed by the revelations. What happens now? Even if what you say is true, she has powerful friends' connections. She does, Sebastian agrees, but I have something more powerful, the truth and the influence to make it heard. He kneels before her chair, taking her hands in his. Margaret, I need you to trust me. Will you? Looking into his dark eyes, Margaret sees strength, integrity, and something that makes her heart race despite everything. Yes, she whispers. Good, because tomorrow we're going to ensure justice is served. And then, his thumbs brush across her knuckles, then I have a very important question to ask you. Before Margaret can ask what he means, shouting erupts from somewhere in the house. Sebastian and Margaret rush to the window to see torches moving across the estate grounds, but these aren't friendly lights. Armed men on horseback are approaching the manor, and at their head rides a figure that makes Sebastian's jaw tighten with grim recognition. What is it? Margaret asks, seeing his expression. Helena's brother, the solicitor. It seems word of my investigation has reached them. Sebastian's voice is deadly calm. They're not going to wait for legal proceedings. They're coming to eliminate the evidence and the witness. Margaret's blood runs cold as she realizes what he means. They're coming to kill me. Not if I can help it, Sebastian says, his hand moving to the pistol concealed beneath his jacket. Margaret, whatever happens, stay close to me. We're about to discover just how far Helena is willing to go to protect her secrets. The sound of breaking glass echoes from below as the attackers reach the manor. The final confrontation has begun, and Margaret's life hangs in the balance. The crash of splintering wood echoes through Thornfield Manor as armed men force their way through the main entrance. Margaret can hear Helena's voice below, sharp with panic and rage, directing the intruders toward the upper floors where Margaret's chamber is located. This way, Sebastian says grimly, guiding Margaret away from her room. There's a servant's staircase that leads to the kitchens. We need to reach the stables. But as they creep through the darkened corridors, it becomes clear that Helena's brother has planned this assault carefully. Men are stationed at every exit, their torches casting dancing shadows on the walls like demons from a nightmare. Your Grace, comes a voice from the main staircase. We know you're here. Bring the girl down and no one needs to be hurt. Sebastian's jaw tightens as he recognizes the voice of Thomas Whitmore, Helena's brother, and the architect of Lord Edmund's ruin. Sebastian has dealt with men like Whitmore before, men who hide their viciousness behind legal respectability. The library, Sebastian whispers to Margaret. Your father's study has a hidden passage, all old houses do. Can you think of anywhere he might have concealed an escape route? Margaret's mind races through memories of her childhood, times when her father would disappear into his study for hours. The fireplace, she breathes. He used to say the stones told stories. I always thought he meant metaphorically, but... They slip into Lord Edmund's study, a room that Helena has kept locked since his death. Dust covers the heavy wooden furniture, and Edmund's books still line the walls exactly as he left them. Margaret runs her hands along the fireplace stones, searching for any irregularity. Here, she says suddenly, pressing against a stone that sits slightly differently than the others. With a grinding sound, a section of the wall swings inward, revealing a narrow passage that leads into darkness. "Your father was a wise man," Sebastian says approvingly, but before they can enter the passage, footsteps thunder up the main staircase. "There in the study," Helena's voice screams. "I saw light under the door." Sebastian draws his pistol as the door bursts open. Thomas Whitmore enters first, flanked by two rough-looking men who are clearly not the type usually found in a country solicitor's employ. "Your Grace," Thomas says with mock civility, "how good of you to save us the trouble of a search. You've caused considerable inconvenience with your investigation." "I imagine discovering the truth is always inconvenient for men like you," Sebastian replies coolly, positioning himself between Margaret and the intruders. Helena appears in the doorway, her usually perfect composure shattered. "Just kill them both," she snarls. "Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Problem solved." "Helena," Margaret gasps, shocked despite everything by her stepmother's casual cruelty. "Oh, don't look so surprised, dear stepdaughter," Helena sneers. "Did you think this was about disliking you? This has always been about money, your money. When your father started asking questions about his investments, we had to expedite his departure from this world." The casual admission of murder hangs in the air like poison. Margaret's face goes white as the full horror of her situation sinks in. "You killed my father," she whispers. "Poison in his evening brandy," Helena says with chilling matter-of-factness. "Quick, relatively painless, and easily mistaken for heart failure in a man of his age. We would have been content to let you live out your days as an unwanted dependent, but then you had to attract his Grace's attention." Sebastian's finger tightens on his pistol trigger. 3 years of theft, fraud and murder. You must be very proud, Whitmore. Thomas shrugs. "Business is business, your Grace, though I admit I'm surprised. A man of your station, interested in a plain little nobody like Margaret. Surely you could do better." "I could do no better," Sebastian says firmly, "because Lady Margaret is the finest woman I have ever known. Intelligent, compassionate, genuine, everything your sister and her daughter pretend to be." Margaret's heart stops at his words, but Thomas merely laughs. "How touching. Unfortunately, your touching romance ends here." He signals to his men. "Kill the Duke first, make the girl watch, then dispose of her as well." But Sebastian doesn't wait for them to act. In one fluid motion, he fires his pistol, sending one attacker sprawling. Before the others can react, he grabs a heavy candlestick from Edmund's desk and strikes the second man down. "The passage, Margaret, now." But Thomas has drawn his own weapon and blocks their path to the secret door. "Impressive, your Grace, but futile. My sister was right. This needs to end tonight." The standoff is broken by an unexpected voice from the doorway. "Actually, Uncle Thomas, I think it's time for a different ending." Everyone turns to see Vivienne standing in the entrance, but she's not alone. Behind her are constables from the village, their weapons drawn and faces grim. Helena stares at her daughter in shock. "Vivienne, what are you doing?" "What I should have done years ago," Vivienne says, her beautiful face set with determination. "I heard everything, Mother. Your confession, your plans, all of it." Thomas raises his pistol toward Vivienne, but Sebastian is faster. A second shot rings out, and Thomas falls, his weapon clattering harmlessly across the floor. "Vivienne," Helena gasps, "you don't understand. Everything we did was for you, for your future." "You murdered my stepfather," Vivienne says flatly. "You stole Margaret's inheritance. You turned me into an accomplice through my silence." She looks at Margaret with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, I'm so very sorry. I was jealous, selfish, blinded by my own wants, but I won't be part of murder." As the constables move to arrest Helena and the surviving attacker, Margaret finds herself swaying with shock and exhaustion. 3 years of believing herself worthless, unwanted, burdensome, all based on lies constructed around her father's murder. Sebastian's arms come around her, steady and warm and safe. "It's over," he murmurs against her hair. "Justice will be done, your inheritance will be restored, and you'll never have to fear them again." Margaret looks up at him with wonder. "But why? Why did you investigate? Why did you care enough to?" "Because," Sebastian says softly, From the moment I saw you serving others while believing yourself unworthy of service, I knew I had found something rare and precious. Because your mind challenges me, your kindness humbles me, and your strength inspires me. Because I love you, Margaret Ashford, and I have from the very first day." Through her tears, Margaret finally finds her voice. "I love you too, but Sebastian, I'm still the same person. I'm still plain, still too intellectual, still." Sebastian silences her with a kiss that is gentle and fierce and full of promise. When they break apart, his dark eyes burn with intensity. "You are beautiful in ways that matter. You are brilliant in ways that inspire. You are perfect in ways that complete me." His voice grows formal, but his eyes remain tender. "Lady Margaret Ashford, would you do me the extraordinary honour of becoming my wife?" Margaret looks around the destroyed study where her father once worked, where his murderer has just been brought to justice, where the truth has finally set her free. She thinks of the cruel words that once defined her life. "No gentleman will want you." How wrong those words had been. "Yes," she whispers, then stronger. "Yes, Sebastian, yes, with all my heart." The kiss that seals their engagement is witnessed by constables, by a repentant stepsister, and by the ghost of vindicated justice. Outside, dawn is breaking over Thornfield Manor, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. A new day for a woman who has finally learned her own worth. 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning, Lady Margaret Ashford walks down the aisle of the village church toward the man who saw her true value when everyone else saw only shadows. She wears her grandmother's wedding dress, altered to fit her slender frame, and her father's signet ring on a chain around her neck, symbols of the love and heritage that were nearly stolen from her. Vivienne stands as her maid of honour, having used her testimony to ensure Helena's conviction, and having discovered in the process her own capacity for courage and integrity. She has declined 3 marriage proposals, choosing instead to travel and discover who she is beyond her beauty. Helena Ashford sits in prison, her beauty faded and her schemes exposed, finally facing consequences for her cruelty. Thomas Whitmore died of his gunshot wound, taking his secrets with him but leaving enough evidence to restore Margaret's full inheritance. As Sebastian takes Margaret's hand at the altar, he whispers words meant only for her. "My Duchess, my love, my heart's truest choice." Margaret whispers back, "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." Their wedding reception is held at Thornfield Manor, but it's different now, filled with laughter instead of tension, love instead of manipulation, truth instead of lies. Margaret has hired Mrs. Winters as head housekeeper and given generous settlements to all the servants who suffered under Helena's reign. And in the evening, when the guests have gone home and the house is quiet, the Duke and Duchess of Ravencrest sit in Edmund's restored study, reading poetry aloud to each other by candlelight. Margaret's journal lies open on the desk, no longer filled with hidden dreams, but with plans for schools she wants to establish, books she wants to write, and a life she wants to build with the man who proved that love sees worth where others see only worthlessness. Sometimes the cruelest words become the foundation for the most beautiful revenge, not revenge through bitterness, but revenge through joy, through love triumphant, through a life lived fully and fearlessly despite those who tried to diminish it. Margaret Ashford, once told she was unwanted and unmarriageable, became the Duchess of Ravencrest not by changing who she was, but by finding someone who loved her exactly as she had always been. And in loving her, Sebastian discovered that the most precious treasures are often hidden in plain sight, overlooked by those too blind to see true worth. Their love story became legend in the county, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, born from truth and nurtured by the radical belief that every person deserves to be loved for who they truly are. If this story of love triumphing over cruelty touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember that their worth isn't determined by others' opinions.